Deneen, what is your book about?
So thank you for having me, Mo. I am just like so excited to be here to be able to talk about ancestral trauma, but more importantly, to talk about my healing journey that actually started it all. So I have over 30 years under my belt in social work, and I have worked with just about every population. I connected deeply with children for the most part who had been under the care of the state. And so most of those children were foster children. They were waiting to be adopted. Some of them never were adopted. And I was instrumental in just ensuring their well-being while they waited, while their life came together. And so during that time, I started to see some patterns that were connected to where they came from with their families. And then also, I started to see that not only were they experiencing forms of trauma, but the family that they grew up in actually had the culture of trauma. And so that kind of piqued my interest in really just diving deeper into behaviors, why people do the things they do or why they don't do the things they do, and how that impacts their lives later. And so it wasn't until 2011, after I had actually been in social work for a lot of time, that I started to recognize that I too had been carrying a lot of unresolved pain and trauma of my own from childhood. And so it started to really, really become highlighted for me. And believe it or not, even though I was very successful of helping these children and their families to overcome and to understand a lot of their trauma, I wasn't able to do that for myself, which I thought was like, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so, so I knew that I was carrying things. I knew that it had been getting in the way of me fully and completely being all that I could be. I just couldn't figure out how to get around it, how to get through it, if you will.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until really the bottom fell out. And that's what it felt like. The bottom of my soul fell out because it could no longer hold on to all of what I had been carrying since I was a little girl. And it was then that I was led to the revelation of that it was my time. It was my turn to actually start to heal my life. And what was that going to look like? Because I had never done it before. And so that prompted a journey in 2011 that took me so deep into myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed me the privilege to connect to a lot of things that I had actually stuffed down, a lot of things that were surrounding spiritual gifts that I've had since a child, that I was made to feel I was ridiculed about being different because I would just blurt things out. And I always had a connection to other people's pain, even as a child. And so I cried all the time. And, I'm the youngest of 7. And so, my siblings, they were like, get over it. We're tired of this girl crying all the time, and I couldn't express it because I'm a kid at the time. So I couldn't express all of these emotions I was feeling that really weren't mine at the time. They were other people's.
Well, you said before that you saw those children living in a culture of trauma themselves because the parents or the family was already practicing. What does it mean to live in this culture of trauma? How does that feel like? How can somebody imagine that?
Yes, yes. So as children, we have a compass that tells us, which is our intuition. We all have intuition. And that is the gift that Divine has given us to know the difference when there's danger, when we are sensing and feeling uncomfortable about something or someone. And we can't always put it into words, but we can feel it deeply within ourselves. And so as children, even though we've never been parents because we're children, we have this sixth sense, if you will, when things are occurring in our environment, our home life, that are not conducive to being healthy. Now, I can use myself as the example because I have countless examples of what that could look like. For me, it started with neglect and not having enough food to eat, not having warm clothes in the winter. Now, as a child, I knew that this isn't right. I'm supposed to have a warm coat. There's snow outside. Why don't I have a warm coat? I should have enough food to eat. I'm still hungry when I go to sleep. These weren't
Mm-hmm.
things that people told me. This was just an intuition. I knew that there should have been things that I didn't receive. And so that is a culture of neglect. But there's also other cultures that people could experience as children, where their needs are not being met on some level. And so internally, they can sense and feel that this is not right, or that maybe somebody is mistreating them in some way. They know that that is not right. They can't articulate it, but they can sense and feel that this is not the way that things should be, if that makes sense.
That completely makes sense, but of course there are points in every childhood where you do not get what you want. If
That's
it
right.
is the big toy for Christmas or
Mm-hmm.
something else. Is that also connected to trauma? Does every single parent need to be scared of saying no to their children when it comes to stuff like that? Of course, about food and everything, we don't need to discuss that, but
Right,
you
right,
understand my
right,
point.
right. No, I don't want parents to be fearful of saying no. But what I would encourage them to do, if there is a no in the conversation, that they take the time to explain the no.
Mm-hmm.
If you continue to get a series of no's as children, then you will start to internalize it as there's something wrong with me. I'm not deserving of X, Y, and Z. I am not worthy, right? So whatever it is, if there is a no, you can't have another piece of cake. No, you can't have that toy. No, you can't go play soccer today. Then there should be some form of explanation. It doesn't have to be long-winded. But there should be an explanation so that the child can understand that it's not them, that there is a reason, rationale why the parent is saying that they can't do something or engage with someone, because maybe there's a safety factor involved. And so sometimes parents will leave out very important information. They will just say no because they're talking to a child and they feel like, you're a child, stay in a child's place. I don't have to explain myself. I said no. No is a complete sentence, and we're going to leave it at that. But again, I would encourage anyone, not even just parents, but anyone, if there is a no involved, that, depending on the relationship, that you would take a moment to explain, the reason why you're saying no.
That makes total sense. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you for helping all the parents out there, first of all. But I have another big, big topic that I want to talk with you about. You say that you continue the legacy of your great great grandmother. To put it in your words, you are her returned breath, her unspoken prayer fulfilled. How do you mean that?
Yes. So I am what is called a Black Indian woman. My mother was Native American. My father was African. And so that is is how I relate myself culturally. On my mother's side, nothing but Native American women, and my great great grandmother Lucinda, who I'm speaking of, actually was considered a chosen one in her tribe. And a chosen one means someone who actually is highly gifted, has an array of different spiritual gifts given to them, and they use these gifts for a higher purpose to help other people internally heal, externally heal. So she was able to place her hands on people to heal them. She was able to pour love into them. She was able to provide wisdom that they didn't have outside of themselves, so that they could start to understand that the things that they were going through, that most of us are going through today, externally, have nothing to do with us, but have everything to do with our divine calling and reason why we're here. And so she passed a long time ago, 122 years to be exact. And it wasn't until I was born, and I didn't know this, but it wasn't revealed to me until much later on. The circumstances around my own birth, actually, I really should not be here. My parents actually used 2 different contraceptives to prevent me from coming because they already had 6 girls. And so I came because of the divine purpose that was connected to her calling, to her recognizing that in this lifetime, the 21st century, that there would be a great need for soul healing, the soul healing that I do, the legacy that she left to me. And so through the journey that I had expressed to you earlier, that is highlighted in my book, I had to actually unravel my life, so that I could actually understand my why. All of the things that I had encountered that were painful and traumatic had purpose. It was a preparation for where I am now as an ancestral trauma expert.
So I imagine that the times have changed a lot since 1903. So maybe everything got a bit more intense, maybe something else. What did change in soul healing over those years?
Well, are you asking me what changed with regards to when my
But
great great grandmother, or as far as
the core question is if you do something differently than your great 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 grandmother, or if you just do the same stuff that they did
okay,
122
yeah,
years ago.
that's a great question. So along my journey, um, one of the I would say the most challenging um things that I encountered with my healing journey for myself personally was the connection that I have to my ancestors. So I have a gift where I actually connect to them spiritually through Holy Spirit. And I can actually hear, believe it or not, I can actually hear them, and they speak to me. And not only can I hear my ancestors, but I can hear anyone's ancestors. And it's through meditation that I'm actually tapping into them. And so this was occurring. I didn't know this before. This was occurring during my healing journey, where I started through meditation to connect to them. And so I was getting downloads of information from them, and I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't understand it. I would just actually write it down because I knew that it was imperative. I just didn't know how it was connected to me. Later on, I was able to get to a place more grounded within myself where this information started to make sense. And so what I was able to do with the information later was actually create the book that is available now,
Hmm.
which highlights my journey of healing, but also highlights my journey with returning back to the gifts that I had been ridiculed for. and recognizing that these gifts that I had were the greatest part of who I am. And they allow me to help other people with understanding who they are, understanding their ancestral generational trauma as it relates to their family and bloodline. And it also allows me to help the individual person look at their own soul wounds, which are connected to the experiences that they have had painfully, and to understand it fully and completely so that it no longer holds them hostage, but allows them to be empowered and more in control of how they emote.
Okay, first of all, wow. Um, it's hard to hear that and not be blown off by that. I completely believe you. Or it's not that, but what you are saying to me in retrospect is that there is an afterlife, that all of our spirits
Yes.
are able to communicate with each other when we die,
Yes.
and it just changes the perspective on life on everybody. So let's say you are correct in everything, and these are your ancestors, and everything is especially like that. It's not a religion, really. So do you
Right.
also hear God, or are you believing or knowing that there is nothing else but just an afterlife?
Right. So no, I identify as a Christian woman. I'm a woman of God. I was raised, in with God, Holy Spirit, the Trinity. And so
Mhm.
when I do my work, I first actually pray, and I actually connect with Holy Spirit. And Holy Spirit is actually the gift that God left behind for all of us to be able to actually tap into if we choose to, because there's always free will. And so I know and I recognize the fact that this is not Deneen. This is not Deneen. This is Holy Spirit guiding me and allowing me access to not only my ancestors, but to other people's ancestors for the reason of healing. And so the level of intimate details that I receive when I am working on behalf of someone to provide enlightenment about their experience with pain and trauma as it relates to their family and bloodline, it blows people away, because there's no way that I would have the details that I have if it had not been the ability for Holy Spirit to provide this information to me unknowingly. I had somebody before, believe it or not, someone years ago who I was doing what I call a soul journey for. Um, and she said to me before I actually started the process, because it takes several days for me to actually meditate on someone's behalf. She said, "You're not going to Google me, are you?" And I had to laugh, and I said, "The information that I'm going to provide to you is not on Google. Trust and believe that it is not on Google." So, and she was blown away. And she said, "I'm embarrassed that I even said that to you, because I can see that, yes, there's no way that you would have been able to, this is not information on Google. And you would not have been able to provide me this wealth of information about my family and all of our drama and things that have happened, to me personally, in such detail." So I say for sure the work that I do is spiritual in nature. It is highly spiritual. Um, it doesn't matter what religion the person is that I am connecting with, or their bloodline. They could be Jewish, they can be Muslim, whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they get resolution and understanding, which is what I provide them. They don't even have to believe that I'm connecting to their ancestors. I really don't care about that. What I care about is the pureness of the process, because I understand where it's coming from. Other people might not understand or believe it, but most people who come to me, I could be, as I say, an elephant in a pink tutu, and they would welcome the information because they are emotionally exhausted, and they want answers, and they want a different life and a different way of being emotionally.
Before we started, I told you that we Germans are always very skeptic, and that every single question I ask from now on is coming from curiosity and not from skepticism or anything like
Yes.
that. But especially when you say something like every single one of us has that Holy Spirit, every single one of us can choose to use it or contact it. Does that mean that everybody could have the powers and marks that you have, that everybody could learn to talk to their ancestors, or has anybody a different Holy Spirit from yours?
Yes. That's a great question. So again, I want to just caution and say that, depending on the practice of the person, the religion, okay? When I say Holy Spirit, I'm speaking of Christian, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The Trinity. So there are, of course, religions who might not actually call it Holy Spirit. They may call it
Okay, yeah.
something else. Okay. But what I do want to say is that I believe, and I have been raised to believe, that everyone has gifts, regardless of what religion. We are born with certain spiritual gifts. And these spiritual gifts were given to us to develop and be prepared by life, almost like the polishing of a diamond.
Mm-hmm.
So the diamond is made under pressure. And so our lives will resemble a lot of pressure, hardships, trials, tribulations, and the pain and trauma that I actually work with. And so these gifts more than likely become more aware when you are a child. Most children, when you observe them, they are very free-spirited. They're very lighthearted. And it is because of, again, my belief and my practice that prior to them being formed, they were in spirit world. And so they were free. Now that they are here, in this lifetime, in the physical, and they are being raised by parents who, on some levels, have forgotten their own freedom, their own spiritual gifts. There becomes almost a fear when children start to talk about possibly seeing people who have already departed. Like maybe, oh, I talked to grandma last night. And the parent says, you couldn't have talked to grandma. Grandma passed away. Remember, we went to grandma's funeral and grandma's gone. And the child is, very adamant about, no, I spoke to her. She sat on my bed and she told me whatever. And then the parent, because of that conversation, becomes fearful, right? And there might have been elements of the conversation that the child recited that actually had some really solid details that child wouldn't have known, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe it occurred before the child was even born. And so I'm using that as an example because I do want people to recognize that we all do have gifts. They're all different. They can be similar as well. So when you ask me the question about do we all have the same gifts, are we all able to connect to our ancestors? Possibly you could connect to your ancestors if that is a gift that, that has been given to you and something that you're not afraid to explore. It's a possibility. I'm not the only one that I'm sure that can connect to ancestors that can hear them. There are people actually who can see people who have transitioned. So there's an array of different gifts, and they're not all, they're not all the woo-woo. They're not all that. The intuition is a gift that
Mm-hmm.
everybody has if they choose to use it. So that is just one of many beautiful gifts that we have been given. But most people, depending on the family culture that they're born into, they don't explore it again because of fear and because of their parents, not wanting them to be shunned like I was.
When everybody has those gifts, how can you find them when they are being suppressed from the household you're coming from? So now in your later years, you're hearing this episode, you hear about the gifts that everybody has. And of course, intuition is something everybody knows about. But how can you find your
Mm-hmm.
special gifts?
Mm-hmm.
What's the
Yeah,
best
yeah.
way to come
So
about that?
yes, that's another great question for sure. I would say number one, that if this conversation that we're having, if the listener is feeling something, they're curious, I would ask them to pay attention to what's going on in their body as they are listening to this podcast. If it is excitement, if there's butterflies going on, that probably is a clue that there's something deeper going on that maybe they have suppressed. And
Mhm.
so I would strongly encourage them to maybe journal about it. And this might be even different as far as the journaling, because not everybody journals. I get that. But I still would encourage that if there's a curiosity about it, that you can really sit back and say, I remember when I was 6 years old, I had an imaginary friend. And I would talk to this imaginary friend a lot until people started to tease me about him. My family started to not believe me. It became, I became the butt of jokes. And so there goes this isn't acceptable. So you kind of pull back from being so free, right? So I would really encourage the listener to go back in time, give themselves full permission to kind of just sit and revisit their childhood, right? And think, were there times when I knew things before other people? When I said things that seemed to be out of turn and maybe, made people feel uncomfortable? What did that look like? Where was that coming from? And to explore that so that you can give yourself the opportunity to open yourself up to it, because more than likely, like myself, because it wasn't acceptable, it wasn't popular, people didn't get it, I started to stuff it down and didn't recognize when I was doing that, disconnecting from my gifts, that it was really creating internal angst and depression. Because as I mentioned earlier, my gifts are the biggest part of who I am.
Wow. Thank you so, so much for those insights. Where can people go to buy your book or to get into contact with you?
Yes. So my book is available on Amazon. And then it's also available for order if you want a hard copy. You can go to Barnes & Noble, believe it or not. You can go on and order it. And then go to your local Barnes & Noble and pick it up if you want the hardback. The paperback is Amazon. And then if anyone is interested in exploring more about their gifts, about their emotional pain and trauma, about their family culture and how all of that came to be using my gifts, they can visit my website, which is my name, DeneenJoyner.com.
Thank you so, so much for your time.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.